The day Sarah Henderson stood before the congregation in her plain gray dress, dirt still under her fingernails from working her father's failing farm, was the day Reverend Marcus Thornhill declared her unmarriageable. The words rang through the small wooden church in Butte, Montana like a death knell, and every person in those pews turned to stare at the 20-year-old woman whose face had gone white as fresh snow. It was September of 1877, and Sarah had come seeking the Reverend's blessing to be introduced to potential suitors, as was customary for young women of marrying age in their community. Instead, she received public humiliation that would have broken a weaker spirit. "Look at her," Reverend Thornhill had announced to the gathered crowd, his jowls shaking with each word. "Plain as a fence post. No man of standing would want such a creature for a wife. She has no dowry, no beauty, no accomplishments. I cannot in good conscience waste the time of decent men by suggesting her as a match." Sarah had fled the church with tears streaming down her face, her worn boots pounding against the dusty street as she ran past the saloon, the general store, and the assayer's office where miners came to weigh their copper and silver. She did not stop running until she reached the edge of town, where her father's small farm sat on 20 acres of stubborn Montana soil. Her mother had died 3 years prior from consumption, and her father had followed just 6 months ago after a mining accident left him too injured to recover. Sarah had been managing alone ever since, trying to keep the farm operational while the bank threatened foreclosure. Thomas Lawson had been standing outside the saloon when Sarah ran past, and something in her desperate flight had caught his attention. He was a tall man of 24 with sun-weathered skin and calloused hands that spoke of years working cattle drives and ranch work. His dark hair fell across his forehead beneath a worn Stetson, and his blue eyes held the kind of steady determination that came from surviving the harsh realities of frontier life. Thomas had arrived in Butte 3 weeks earlier with money saved from 2 years working on a ranch in Wyoming, intending to purchase land and start his own small cattle operation. He had been standing there with a whiskey he had not yet touched, contemplating whether Montana was truly where he wanted to put down roots. When he asked the bartender what had happened, the man had laughed cruelly and explained the scene at the church. Thomas felt anger rise in his chest, hot and immediate. He had known men like Reverend Thornhill before, men who wielded their position to lord power over others, who measured human worth in superficial terms. Thomas drained his whiskey in one swallow, set the glass down with a sharp crack, and walked toward the church with purposeful strides. Reverend Thornhill was still inside, basking in the attention of several prominent town ladies who were clucking their agreement with his assessment. The man was perhaps 50 years old, with a round belly that suggested he ate far better than most of his congregation. His wife stood beside him, a pinched woman in an expensive dress that seemed absurdly formal for a rough mining town like Butte. "Reverend Thornhill," Thomas said, his voice cutting through the chatter. Every head turned toward him. "I heard what you said about Sarah Henderson." The Reverend's eyes narrowed. "And who might you be, young man? I do not recognize you as one of my flock." "My name is Thomas Lawson, and I am not part of any flock. But I am a man looking for a wife, and from what I hear, you just declared Sarah Henderson unsuitable for marriage." A titter went through the gathered women. Reverend Thornhill's face reddened. "That is correct. The girl is plain, poor, and has nothing to recommend her. I was merely being honest." Thomas took 3 steps forward until he stood directly before the Reverend. Though Thomas was not a violent man by nature, something in his stance made the older man take a small step backward. "Then I'll take her," Thomas said clearly. "And I'll prove you wrong about her worth. That woman has been running a farm alone, keeping herself fed and clothed through her own labor. That takes more strength than sitting in a fine church passing judgment on people who work harder in a day than you do in a month." The gasp that went through the church was audible. Reverend Thornhill's face turned purple. "How dare you speak to me in such a manner? I am a man of God." "Then maybe God should teach you something about kindness," Thomas replied. He turned on his heel and walked out before the Reverend could sputter a response. Thomas had no clear plan as he rode his horse out toward the Henderson farm. He only knew that he could not let that woman's humiliation stand without at least trying to make it right. The farm was easy to find. A small house with a sagging porch and a barn that needed new boards. A vegetable garden stretched behind the house, neat rows indicating careful tending despite limited resources. Chickens scratched in a wire pen, and a single milk cow grazed in a small paddock. Sarah was sitting on the porch steps when he arrived, her face still blotchy from crying. She looked up at the sound of hoofbeats, alarm crossing her features. Thomas dismounted and removed his hat, holding it respectfully in both hands. "Miss Henderson, my name is Thomas Lawson. I apologize for intruding, but I wanted to speak with you about what happened today." Sarah stood quickly, wiping at her face. "Please go away. I have been humiliated enough for one day." "I am not here to humiliate you. I am here because what that preacher said was wrong, and I told him so to his face." She stared at him, confusion replacing some of the hurt in her brown eyes. "Why would you do that? You do not even know me." "I know that any man who judges a woman's worth by her face or her bank account is a fool. I know that you have been working this farm alone, which shows character and strength. And I know that you deserve better than what happened today." Sarah's lower lip trembled. "That does not change the fact that he is right. I am plain. I have no money. My father left debts I cannot pay. The bank will take this farm within 2 months. I have nothing to offer anyone." Thomas took a step closer. "What if you did not have to face that alone?" "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I came to Butt looking to start a life. I have money saved. I have experience with cattle and horses. I need land and you have land. You need help and I can provide it. What if we made an arrangement that benefited us both?" Sarah crossed her arms over her chest protectively. "What kind of arrangement? Marriage, if you would have me. Not out of pity," he added quickly as she opened her mouth to protest, "but as a partnership. You know this land and this community. I know ranching and have the funds to invest. Together we could save this farm and build something good. You are proposing marriage to a woman you met 5 minutes ago. That is insane." Thomas smiled for the first time, a crooked grin that softened his weathered face. "Maybe, but I have made crazier decisions. I once rode through a blizzard in Wyoming because I was too stubborn to wait it out. I survived. I figure marrying a hard-working woman with land is actually one of my smarter choices." Despite herself, Sarah felt a small laugh escape. "You are serious, completely." "Look, I am not promising love or romance. I am promising partnership and respect. I will pay off your debts. We will work this farm together. And I swear on my life that I will never make you feel the way that preacher made you feel today." Sarah studied him carefully. He had an honest face, she thought. Weathered and tired, but honest. His clothes were worn but clean, his hands strong. There was no mockery in his eyes, no calculation, just steady sincerity. "I do not understand why you would do this." Thomas shifted his weight, choosing his words carefully. "My mother died when I was 12. My father remarried within 6 months, chose a woman who was considered beautiful by everyone's standards. She made our lives hell for 5 years until my father finally died and I could leave. She had a pretty face and a cruel heart. I learned young that what matters is what is inside a person. When I saw you running from that church, I saw someone who had been hurt for no good reason. And when I heard what you have accomplished here alone, I saw someone worth knowing. That is why." The sun was beginning to set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the farmyard. Sarah looked at her small house, at the garden she had planted and tended, at the animals she had cared for through months of loneliness and struggle. She thought about the bank notices, about the sleepless nights wondering how she would survive, about the crushing weight of doing everything alone. "If I agree to this, I need to know what you expect from a wife." Thomas met her eyes directly. "I expect a partner. Someone who will work beside me and let me work beside them. Someone who will be honest with me. As for the other aspects of marriage, that will be your choice in your time. I will not force anything on you." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks at the implication, but she appreciated his directness. "You would be willing to have a marriage that is unconsummated. I would be willing to wait until you decide you want otherwise. If that time never comes, then we will be business partners who share a name. If it does, then we will be more. Either way, you will have security and respect." "This is the strangest proposal I could have ever imagined." "Is that a yes?" Sarah took a deep breath. Every practical bone in her body told her this was the answer to her prayers, even if it came in an unexpected form. Every emotional part of her screamed that it was too strange, too quick. But when she looked at Thomas Lawson, she saw something she had not seen in a long time, hope for a future that was not just endless struggle. "Yes," she said finally, "I will marry you." Thomas's smile widened. "Then we should probably get to know each other a bit before I make you Mrs. Lawson. May I come inside?" They sat at Sarah's small kitchen table and talked until the stars came out. Thomas told her about growing up in Nebraska, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the cattle drives he had worked and the places he had seen. Sarah told him about her childhood in Montana, about how her father had come seeking copper and found only hard work, about her mother's gentle nature and her father's determination. They talked about the farm, about what crops grew best in Montana's short growing season, about the livestock they would need and the repairs the buildings required. "The roof leaks in 3 places," Sarah admitted. "I have been catching the water in buckets, but I do not have the money for proper repairs." "I can fix that," Thomas said. "It will be one of the first things we do." "We," Sarah repeated softly. "I have not had a we in a very long time." Thomas reached across the table and placed his hand palm up, an offering. After a moment's hesitation, Sarah placed her hand in his. His grip was warm and calloused, the hand of a working man. "You have a we now," he said. They were married 3 days later by the justice of the peace, deliberately avoiding Reverend Thornhill's church. Thomas wore his best shirt, which was not saying much, and Sarah wore the only nice dress she owned, a blue cotton frock her mother had made years ago. There were no guests, no celebration, just a simple exchange of vows and the signing of papers. When the justice pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas kissed Sarah's cheek chastely, and she felt her heart skip in an unexpected way. Thomas moved his belongings into the farm that afternoon. He insisted on taking the small room that Sarah had been using for storage, giving her the larger bedroom that had been her parents'. "You need your privacy," he said firmly when she protested. "This arrangement works only if we both have space that is our own." The first week of their marriage was spent in constant work. Thomas proved to be as capable as he had claimed, fixing the roof with new shingles he purchased in town, repairing the barn door that had been hanging crooked, reinforcing the chicken coop against predators. Sarah worked beside him when she could and managed the household tasks when she could not. They fell into an easy rhythm, learning each other's habits and preferences. Thomas discovered that Sarah sang while she worked in the garden, old ballads her mother had taught her. Sarah discovered that Thomas talked to the animals as he cared for them, carrying on full conversations with the cow and horses as if expecting them to answer. These small revelations felt intimate in unexpected ways. The town's reaction to their marriage was mixed. Some people thought Thomas was a fool for taking on a plain wife with debts. Others whispered that he must have gotten Sarah in trouble and was doing the honorable thing. Reverend Thornhill preached a sermon about the folly of rash decisions and the importance of proper courtship, though he never mentioned them by name. Thomas and Sarah ignored the gossip. They were too busy working to care what others thought. Thomas used his savings to pay off the bank, securing the farm's future. He purchased 6 head of cattle, good breeding stock that would form the foundation of a small herd. Sarah expanded the garden, putting up preserves for the coming winter. Together, they prepared for Montana's harsh cold season. A month into their marriage, Sarah realized she was watching Thomas differently. She noticed the way his muscles flexed as he lifted fence posts, the concentration on his face as he worked with leather and tools, the gentleness in his hands when he treated a cut on one of the horse's legs. She noticed how he always served her first at meals, how he asked her opinion before making decisions about the farm, how he had never once spoken to her with anything but respect and kindness. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, Sarah said, "You have not asked me about my past, about whether there were other men before you." Thomas looked at her thoughtfully. "I figured you would tell me if you wanted me to know. Your past is yours unless you choose to share it. There was one man, 3 years ago, the blacksmith's son. We courted for 6 months, then my mother got sick, and he decided he did not want a wife who came with such burdens. He married a girl from Helena instead. He was a fool. He was practical. My mother's illness cost us everything. The doctor bills, the medicines. My father went into the mines to make extra money, which is how he got injured. Everything fell apart." Thomas reached over and took her hand. It had become a habit between them, this casual touching that somehow felt more significant than it should. "His loss was my gain. I do not regret this, Sarah, not for one moment. Truly, truly. You are the hardest worker I have ever met. You are clever and capable. You make the best biscuits I have ever tasted, and when you smile, which you are doing more often lately, your whole face lights up. So no, I do not regret this." Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest. "I do not regret it either. I was scared at first, but now I cannot imagine going back to doing this alone. You will never have to do it alone again." As autumn deepened and the first snows began to fall in the mountains, Sarah found herself falling in love with her husband. It crept up on her gradually, in small moments. The way he brought her wildflowers he found while checking the fence line. The way he learned to make coffee exactly how she liked it. The way he read to her in the evenings from the newspaper he bought in town, his voice deep and soothing. The way he never pressured her for more than she was ready to give. Winter arrived in full force in November, blanketing Butte in heavy snow and driving temperatures far below freezing. Thomas and Sarah spent long hours in the house, working on indoor projects. Thomas repaired tack and carved new handles for tools. Sarah sewed shirts for him from fabric she had been saving, patched quilts, and knitted warm socks. They played cards in the evenings and talked for hours about everything and nothing. One particularly cold night, with the wind howling outside and the fire burning low, Sarah made a decision. Thomas had taken himself off to his small room as usual, bidding her good night with his customary politeness. Sarah stood in her doorway for a long moment, then walked down the short hallway and knocked softly on his door. "Thomas, may I come in?" The The door opened immediately. Thomas stood there in his undershirt and pants, concern on his face. "Is something wrong? Are you ill?" "No, I am fine. I just wanted to talk to you." He stepped aside, and she entered his small room. It was sparse, containing only a narrow bed, a trunk for his belongings, and a small table with a lamp. She sat on the edge of his bed, and he pulled the chair from the table, sitting facing her with worry in his eyes. "What is it, Sarah? We have been married for 3 months now. We have. You have been nothing but kind and respectful to me. You have saved my farm, given me security, and asked nothing in return. I did not marry you for anything in return. I know that. But Thomas, I have something I want to give you anyway." She took a shaky breath. "I do not want separate rooms anymore. I want to be your wife in all ways. I want this to be a real marriage." Thomas's eyes widened. "Sarah, you do not have to do this because you feel obligated. I am not. I am doing this because somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you. I love your kindness and your strength. I love how you talk to the animals and fix things without complaining. I love how you make me laugh and how safe I feel when you are near. I love you, Thomas Lawson, and I want to be a real wife to you." The joy that spread across Thomas's face was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "I have been in love with you since our 2nd week of marriage. I did not say anything because I did not want to pressure you. Sarah, I would be honored to have you as my wife in all ways. But are you certain? There is no rush." In answer, Sarah reached up and placed her hand on his cheek. "I am certain. I want this. I want you." Thomas leaned forward and kissed her, truly kissed her for the first time since their wedding day peck. His lips were gentle but insistent, and Sarah felt heat bloom through her entire body. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "My room has the bigger bed," Sarah whispered. Thomas stood and offered her his hand. "Then lead the way, wife." That night, Thomas proved to be as gentle and patient in lovemaking as he was in all other things. He took his time, learning what pleased her, making sure she felt cherished and desired. When Sarah finally fell asleep in his arms, she felt complete in a way she never had before. Winter passed in a blur of work and growing intimacy. Thomas and Sarah became true partners in every sense, working the farm together during the day and sharing a bed at night. They talked about their dreams for the future, about expanding the herd and maybe adding pigs and sheep. Sarah taught Thomas to bake bread, and he taught her to throw a knife with accuracy. They were building a life together, piece by piece. Spring arrived in late March, bringing muddy roads and the first green shoots pushing through the thawing ground. Sarah realized her monthly courses had not come, and a visit to the doctor in town confirmed what she suspected. She was carrying Thomas's child. She told him that evening as they sat at dinner. Thomas dropped his fork, stared at her for a full 5 seconds, then let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the chickens. He swept her into his arms and spun her around despite her laughing protests. "A baby. Sarah, we are having a baby." "Yes, we are. Are you happy about this?" "Happy. I am beyond happy. I am going to be a father. You are giving me a family, Sarah. A real family." Tears streamed down Sarah's face, but they were tears of joy. "We are making a family together." Thomas kissed her deeply, then dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I promise to protect you and your mother with everything I have. You are already so loved." The pregnancy was not easy. Sarah suffered from terrible sickness in the early months, and Thomas took over more of the household tasks while still managing the farm. He was endlessly patient, holding her hair when she was ill, bringing her weak tea and dry toast, rubbing her back when she ached. As Sarah's belly grew, Thomas became almost comically protective, insisting she not lift anything heavy and worrying constantly about her health. I am pregnant, not made of glass. Sarah laughed one day in July when Thomas tried to prevent her from carrying a basket of vegetables. I know, but I worry. I could not bear it if something happened to you or the baby. Sarah set down the basket and took his face in both hands. We are both strong and healthy. The doctor says everything is progressing well. You need to trust that I know my own limits. I do trust you. I just love you both so much. And we love you. Now let me carry these vegetables inside so I can make dinner. In August, Sarah went into labor on a hot afternoon while Thomas was in town buying supplies. Their nearest neighbor, a widow named Mrs. Patterson, came to assist when Sarah sent word. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night. Thomas arrived home at sunset to find Mrs. Patterson managing things with calm efficiency. He was not allowed in the bedroom, which nearly drove him mad with worry. He paced the kitchen floor until dawn, praying to a God he rarely acknowledged for Sarah's safety. When the baby's cry finally rang out, Thomas nearly broke down the door getting into the bedroom. Sarah lay exhausted against the pillows, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, but she was smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a clean blanket. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Thomas approached the bed as if in a dream. Sarah pulled back the blanket to reveal a red-faced infant with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. "A son," Thomas whispered, awestruck. "We have a son. We need to name him. I was thinking maybe Samuel, after my father, Samuel Lawson. It is perfect." Thomas carefully sat on the edge of the bed and touched one finger to the baby's tiny hand. Samuel gripped it with surprising strength, and Thomas felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "Hello, Samuel. I am your father, and I promise you will never doubt how much you are wanted and loved." Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat from the doorway. "I will leave you three to get acquainted. Sarah, you did beautifully. Mr. Lawson, your wife needs rest and good food. I will check back tomorrow." "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson," Thomas said without taking his eyes off his new son. "I cannot thank you enough." After the widow left, Thomas carefully climbed onto the bed beside Sarah, and they lay together with Samuel between them, marveling at the tiny life they had created. "You were so brave," Thomas murmured to Sarah. "I have never been so scared in my life." "It was worth it," Sarah said, touching Samuel's soft cheek. "He is perfect. You are both perfect. My whole world is in this bed right now." They named Samuel on a Sunday morning, but they did not go to Reverend Thornhill's church for a baptism. Instead, they held a small ceremony at the farm with Mrs. Patterson, a few neighbors they had become friendly with, and the justice of the peace who had married them. It was simple and meaningful, exactly what they wanted. As Samuel grew from infant to baby, Thomas and Sarah's love deepened and matured. They had the inevitable disagreements that all couples faced. Thomas sometimes took on too much work without asking for help, pushing himself to exhaustion. Sarah occasionally grew frustrated with the isolation of farm life and the constant demands of caring for an infant. But they learned to talk through their problems, to apologize when wrong, and to support each other through difficulties. The farm prospered. Their small herd of cattle grew to 15 head. They added chickens and purchased 2 pigs. The garden produced abundantly, and Sarah's preserves became known in town for their quality. Thomas built a larger barn and added a proper chicken house. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable and secure, which was more than most could claim. One autumn afternoon, when Samuel was 6 months old, Sarah was in town buying supplies when she ran into Reverend Thornhill outside the general store. She had successfully avoided him for over a year, but now there was no escape. The Reverend looked at her with barely concealed disdain, his eyes flicking to the baby on her hip. Sarah Henderson. Or I suppose it is Sarah Lawson now. It is. Good day, Reverend. She tried to move past him, but he blocked her path. I heard you married that drifter who spoke so rudely to me in my own church. Tell me, has he abandoned you yet? Men like that rarely stay. Sarah felt anger burn in her chest, but she kept her voice level. My husband is exactly where he should be, at home working our farm. He is a good man, a wonderful father, and the best partner I could have asked for. Everything you said about me being unmarriageable was wrong. Thomas saw value in me that you could not because you judge people by all the wrong measures. The Reverend's face reddened. You should not speak to a man of God in such a way. And you should not have humiliated a young woman in front of the whole town. You should have shown compassion and kindness. Instead, you were cruel. I am grateful for it now because it led me to Thomas, but that does not excuse what you did. She pushed past him, her head held high. Samuel gurgled happily, completely unaware of the significance of the moment. Sarah felt lighter than she had in years. She had finally said what she needed to say to the man who had hurt her so deeply. That evening she told Thomas about the encounter. He listened carefully, then pulled her close. You are the strongest person I know. I am so proud to be your husband. He was wrong about me, and you proved it. We proved it together. We did. And we will keep proving it every day for the rest of our lives. The years passed with the steady rhythm of farm life. Samuel grew into a bright, energetic boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determination. When he was 3, Sarah became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and the labor, while still difficult, was shorter. They welcomed a daughter whom they named Margaret, after Thomas's mother. Thomas proved to be a devoted father, patient and playful with both children. He taught Samuel to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk and carved toys for both children during long winter evenings. Sarah managed the household with efficiency, raising the children while still contributing to the farm work. They hired a young man from town to help with the heaviest work, which allowed Thomas more time with his family. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Thomas presented Sarah with a gift that made her cry. It was a beautiful dress, deep green with delicate embroidery, far nicer than anything she had ever owned. I wanted you to have something special, he said. Something that shows the world how I see you. Thomas, this is too much. When will I ever wear something so fine? We are going to the harvest dance in town next month. I want to show off my beautiful wife. I am not beautiful. I am still plain Sarah Henderson. Thomas cupped her face gently. You will always be beautiful to me, not because of how you look, though I find you lovely, but because of who you are. Your strength, your kindness, your determination. That is what makes you beautiful. But I also think you have lovely eyes, and your smile lights up my world, and you are perfect exactly as you are. So yes, you are beautiful, and I will argue with anyone who says otherwise. Sarah kissed him deeply. How did I get so lucky to find you? I think we found each other, and I am the lucky one. They did attend the harvest dance, Sarah in her new dress and Thomas in a suit he purchased for the occasion. They danced together most of the evening, ignoring the stares and whispers. Reverend Thornhill was there with his wife, and Sarah saw him watching them with an unreadable expression. She did not care. She was happy, truly happy, and that was worth more than any judgment from small-minded people. As they danced, Thomas pulled her close and whispered, Do you remember what I said to you that first day? That I would prove the Reverend wrong about your worth, I remember. I think we have done that. Look at everything we have built. The farm is successful. We have 2 beautiful children. We have a marriage built on real love and respect. You are respected in this community for your hard work and your character. We proved him wrong in every way that matters. Sarah looked up at her husband, at the man who had stood up for her when she was at her lowest, who had offered her partnership and delivered love. "You are right. We did prove him wrong. But more importantly, we proved that snap judgments mean nothing. That real worth comes from character and commitment. That love can grow from the strangest beginnings into something beautiful. I would not change a single thing about how we started. That day in the church led me to you, and you are the best thing that ever happened to me." Even though I was too plain to marry, Thomas laughed and spun her in a circle. "Especially because everyone else was too blind to see your value. Their loss was my gain, and I thank God for it every single day." The music swelled around them, and Sarah rested her head on Thomas's shoulder, feeling completely content. She thought about the girl she had been 5 years ago, broken and humiliated, certain she had no future. She thought about the man who had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to pray. She thought about the life they had built together, brick by brick, day by day, through hard work and growing love. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters and dry summers. There were sick animals and broken equipment. There were sleepless nights with sick children and arguments about money and priorities. But through it all, they had each other. They faced every challenge as partners, as lovers, as best friends. When Samuel was 7 and Margaret was 4, Sarah became pregnant once more. This time, they welcomed twin boys whom they named James and William. The farmhouse was loud and chaotic with 4 children, but it was filled with love and laughter. Thomas expanded the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. They hired a girl from town to help Sarah with the housework and childcare, freeing her to help more with the farm accounts and business decisions. The farm continued to grow. They now had 30 head of cattle, a proper chicken operation that supplied eggs to several businesses in town, and a large garden that produced more than enough for their family and extra to sell. Thomas had a reputation as a fair dealer and a skilled rancher. Sarah was known for her excellent preserves and her sharp business sense. Together, they had built something that would provide for their family for generations. On a summer evening when they had been married for 10 years, Thomas and Sarah sat on their newly expanded porch, watching their 4 children play in the yard. Samuel was teaching Margaret to skip stones in the creek that ran through their property, while the twins toddled after chickens with more enthusiasm than success. "We need to hire more help," Sarah said, leaning against Thomas's shoulder. "The farm is getting too big for us to manage even with young Tom helping." "I know. I was thinking about that. Maybe 2 more hands for the cattle operation, and another woman to help you with the children and the house. That would be good. Thomas, can you believe this is our life? Sometimes I still cannot quite accept how much has changed." Thomas wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "I believe it because we worked for it. We earned every bit of this. You ever think about that day in the church when Reverend Thornhill said those things?" "Sometimes. Mostly I think about how his cruelty led to the best decision I ever made. Do you ever regret how we started? The practical arrangement instead of a romantic courtship." Sarah considered this. "No, I think the way we started made us stronger. We built our love on friendship and respect instead of just passion. The passion came later, but it had a solid foundation. I would not change it. Neither would I. Though I think we should tell our children the full story someday when they are old enough to understand. We should. It is a good story about looking beyond the surface, about the courage to stand up for what is right, about how love can grow in unexpected places." Margaret came running up to the porch, breathless and excited. "Mama, Papa, Samuel says we can go fishing tomorrow if you say yes. Can we, please?" Thomas looked at Sarah, who nodded with a smile. "Yes, we can go fishing tomorrow, but everyone needs to do their morning chores first." The children cheered, and Margaret ran back to tell her brothers. Thomas and Sarah watched them with the pride and joy that comes from watching your children grow. "We did good," Sarah said softly. "We did great," Thomas corrected. "We took two hurt, struggling people and made them into a family. We took a failing farm and made it prosper. We took a loveless arrangement and built real love. We exceeded every expectation. We proved everyone wrong. We proved everyone wrong." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sarah thought about all the things that had to happen for her to end up here. Her parents' deaths had been tragedies, but they had led her to independence. The Reverend's cruelty had been devastating, but it had brought Thomas into her life. Every hardship had been a stepping stone to this moment, sitting on her porch with her husband and watching their children play. She thought about the girl she had been, plain and poor and desperate. She thought about the woman she had become, confident and capable and loved. The transformation had not been easy, but it had been worth every difficult step. "I love you," she said to Thomas, the words easy and natural after 10 years of speaking them daily. "I love you too," he replied, kissing the top of her head. "Always and forever." The years continued to pass. The children grew and helped more with the farm. Samuel showed a natural talent for working with cattle and horses. Margaret inherited her mother's gift for gardening and preserving. The twins were wild and energetic, keeping their parents perpetually on their toes, but they were also sweet-natured and devoted to their family. The farm became one of the most successful in the area. Thomas's reputation for quality cattle spread beyond Butte, and he began selling breeding stock to ranchers across Montana. Sarah's preserves were sold in stores throughout the territory. They were able to save money, invest in improvements, and provide their children with opportunities they had never had. Reverend Thornhill remained in Butte, though his influence waned over the years as younger ministers arrived with more progressive views. He watched the Lawson family's success with what might have been regret, though he never apologized for his words. Sarah occasionally saw him in town and nodded politely, but felt no need to engage. She had forgiven him, not because he deserved it, but because carrying anger would only hurt herself. He was simply a man who had been wrong, and his error had led to her greatest happiness. When Samuel turned 16, he started courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Thomas and Sarah watched their son's tentative romance with amusement and nostalgia, remembering their own unusual beginning. They gave Samuel advice about respecting his chosen girl, about being honest with his feelings, about the importance of friendship in a relationship. "We did not have a normal courtship," Thomas told his son one evening. "But we learned that a good marriage is built on respect, honesty, and partnership. If you remember that, you will do well." Samuel looked between his parents with the wisdom of a young man beginning to understand adult complexities. "Everyone knows the story of how you got together. How Reverend Thornhill said Mama could not marry, and you married her to prove him wrong. Is that really how it happened?" Sarah and Thomas exchanged glances, then Sarah spoke. "That is part of the story, but not all of it. Your father did not marry me just to prove a point. He married me because he saw value in me that others missed. And I married him because he offered me a partnership when I needed one most. We fell in love after we were married, which is unusual, but it does not make our love any less real." "I think it makes it more real," Samuel said thoughtfully. "You chose each other twice, once for practical reasons and then again for love." Thomas felt pride swell in his chest. "That is exactly right, son. We chose each other twice." Margaret's 18th birthday brought another milestone. She announced she had no interest in marrying, at least not yet. She wanted to start a business selling her preserves and baked goods on a larger scale. Thomas and Sarah supported her dream, helping her secure a small shop in town and providing the initial investment for supplies and equipment. Margaret's business thrived, and she became known as one of the finest bakers in Montana. The twins, James and William, were inseparable and shared a passion for horses. When they turned 15, they began training horses for sale, discovering they had a natural gift for the work. The farm expanded again to accommodate a proper training operation. Through it all, Thomas and Sarah remained the heart of the family and the farm. They had grown older together, their hair graying and their faces gaining lines, but their love had only deepened. They still worked side by side during the day and fell into bed together at night, still talking for hours about everything and nothing. On their 20th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a surprise party. Friends and neighbors filled their farmhouse, celebrating the couple who had built something beautiful out of a beginning rooted in humiliation and desperation. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and music. Near the end of the evening, Thomas pulled Sarah into the yard under the stars. "Dance with me," he said. "There is no music playing out here. We do not need music." They swayed together in the darkness, holding each other close. Sarah rested her head on Thomas's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. 20 years, she murmured. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. It is both. We have lived a full life together, Sarah. 4 children, a successful farm, respect in our community. We proved everyone wrong. We proved ourselves right, Sarah corrected. We proved that taking a chance on someone, on something, can lead to amazing things. We proved that love can grow anywhere if you nurture it. We proved that the measure of a person is not in their face or their bank account, but in their character and their actions. Thomas pulled back to look at her face, lit by moonlight and the glow from the house. "I have never regretted walking into that church and defending you, not for 1 second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "You saved me," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "You literally saved my life. I do not know what would have happened if you had not appeared that day. I was broken and desperate, and you gave me hope. You saved me too. I was drifting, looking for a place to belong. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. We saved each other." They kissed under the stars, a deep kiss full of 20 years of love and partnership. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah smiled. "We should get back to the party. Our children will wonder where we went." "Let them wonder for a few more minutes. I want to hold my wife and count my blessings." So they stood together in the Montana night, 2 people who had defied expectations and built a love story out of the most unpromising beginning. They had faced hardship and judgment, worked until their bodies ached, struggled through lean times and celebrated prosperous ones. They had raised 4 children to be good, strong people. They had built a legacy that would endure. As they finally walked back to the house hand in hand, Sarah thought about the preacher who had declared her too plain to marry. She thought about the young cowboy who had said he would take her and prove him wrong. She thought about how that simple declaration had changed the course of her entire life. Thomas had indeed taken her. And together, they had proved that love was not about surface beauty or social standing. It was about commitment and choice, about working together toward common goals, about choosing each other every single day. They had proved that true worth could not be measured by a judgmental eye but only by actions and character. The party continued late into the night. Samuel and his now wife danced with their infant daughter. Margaret laughed with her friends from town. The twins demonstrated a complicated rope trick for amazed guests. The farmhouse was filled with warmth and joy, a testament to everything Thomas and Sarah had built. When the last guest finally left and the children had gone to their respective homes or rooms, Thomas and Sarah sat together in their bedroom, exhausted but happy. Sarah removed her shoes with a grateful sigh while Thomas hung up his good jacket. "That was wonderful," Sarah said. "I cannot believe the children planned all that. They love us. They wanted to celebrate what we have built together. We did build something special, did we not? Not just the farm or the business, but the family itself." Thomas sat beside her on the bed and took her hand. "We built everything special. This life we have, it is everything I ever wanted but never thought I would have. A woman I love who loves me back. Children who are good people. Work that matters. A home that is truly a home. You gave me all of that. We gave it to each other." "Thomas, do you remember what you said that first day? You said you were not promising love or romance, just partnership and respect." "I remember. I was trying to be honest about what I could offer. You delivered so much more than you promised. You gave me love and romance and partnership and respect. You gave me everything. You made it easy. You are so easy to love, Sarah." They prepared for bed, moving with the comfortable familiarity of 20 years together. As they lay in the darkness, Sarah spoke one more time. "I am glad Reverend Thornhill said what he said. I know that is strange, but it is true. If he had not humiliated me, we might never have met. Every painful moment led me to you." Thomas pulled her close, her back against his chest, his arm wrapped protectively around her. "I am glad, too. I am glad I happened to be standing outside that saloon. I am glad I had the courage to defend you. I am glad you said yes to my crazy proposal. I am glad for every single moment that led us here. I love you, Thomas Lawson. I love you, Sarah Lawson, always and forever." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, content in the life they had built together. The years continued their inevitable march. The children married and had children of their own. Samuel took over more of the ranch operations as Thomas slowed down. Margaret's business expanded to 2 locations. The twins started a horse ranch of their own on land. Thomas and Sarah helped them purchase. The original farmhouse was expanded again to accommodate visiting grandchildren, of which there were eventually 12. Thomas and Sarah aged gracefully together, their bodies slowing but their minds sharp and their love constant. They spent their days working less and enjoying more, playing with grandchildren, reading on the porch, taking slow walks around the property they had built together. On a spring morning in 1907, 30 years after their wedding, Sarah and Thomas sat on their porch watching the sun rise over the mountains. They were both 69 years old now, their hair white and their movements slower, but they still held hands like young lovers. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been if I had not walked into that church?" Thomas asked. "Sometimes. I probably would have lost the farm. I do not know what would have become of me. Maybe I would have taken work in town. Maybe I would have left Montana entirely. I try not to think about it too much, because this life is so much better than anything I could have imagined. I think about it sometimes. If I had not been standing outside that saloon at that exact moment, I would have missed you entirely. I might have bought land somewhere else, married someone else, or not married at all. I would have had a different life, but it would have been a lesser life. This life with you has been extraordinary." Sarah squeezed his hand. "We were lucky. We found each other when we both needed finding. It was not just luck, it was courage. You had the courage to say yes to a stranger's proposal. I had the courage to stand up for you when no one else would. We both had the courage to build something from nothing. We did, and look at what we built. 4 children, 12 grandchildren, a successful farm, a good reputation, and 30 years of love. We started with nothing but determination and grew it into this." Thomas raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Best decision I ever made, marrying you." Best decision I ever made, saying yes. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the world wake up around them. Birds sang in the trees Thomas had planted 25 years ago. Cattle lowed in the distance where Samuel was probably already working. Smoke rose from Margaret's house on the next property over, where she lived with her husband and children. The twins' ranch was visible in the distance, a thriving operation. Everything they could see was part of their legacy, built from that single moment when a young cowboy decided to defend a humiliated young woman. From that spark had grown a fire that warmed multiple generations. "I need to tell you something," Thomas said quietly. Sarah looked at him with concern. "What is it?" The doctor said. "My heart is not strong. He does not know how much time I have, but he does not think it is many more years." Sarah felt her own heart clench with fear and sorrow. "Thomas, I am not afraid. I have lived a full, wonderful life. I have loved and been loved. I have children and grandchildren who will carry on after me. I have worked hard and built something that matters. I have no regrets, Sarah, not one." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "I am not ready to lose you, I know. I am not ready to leave you. But when the time comes, I need you to know that every single day with you has been a gift. You made my life worth living. You gave me everything that matters. We still have time. The doctor does not know everything. We have today. We might have tomorrow. We will take whatever time we are given and make the most of it. That is what we have always done." Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder, and they watched the sun climb higher in the sky. She thought about a life without Thomas and could not imagine it. He had been her partner for 30 years, her lover, her best friend. The idea of facing days without him was unbearable, but she also knew he was right. They would take whatever time remained and fill it with love. They had faced every challenge together, and they would face this one the same way. Thomas lived for 5 more years, making it to 74. They were good years, filled with family and love. He slowed down considerably but remained engaged with the farm and his family. He taught his grandsons to ride and rope. He sat with his granddaughters and told them stories. He made sure Sarah knew every day how much he loved her. When the end came, it was peaceful. Thomas died in his sleep with Sarah beside him, just as they had slept every night for 35 years. Sarah woke to find him gone, and though her heart shattered, she found comfort in knowing he had died content and loved. The funeral was enormous. People came from across Montana to pay their respects to Thomas Lawson, a man known for his integrity, his hard work, and his devotion to his family. Sarah stood dry-eyed through the service, leaning on Samuel's arm, accepting condolences with grace. It was only later, alone in the house that echoed with memories, that she allowed herself to truly grieve. She cried for the man she had loved for 35 years, for the partner who had stood beside her through everything, for the future they would not share. But even in her grief, Sarah found gratitude. Gratitude for the years they had shared, for the love they had built, for the family they had created. Gratitude for a stranger's courage and a desperate woman's willingness to take a chance. Sarah lived another 8 years after Thomas's death, dying at the age of 83. She spent those years surrounded by family, helping raise grandchildren and even meeting several great-grandchildren. She never remarried, telling her children that she had been blessed with one great love, and that was enough for any lifetime. When Sarah died peacefully in her sleep, she was buried beside Thomas on the farm they had built together. Their shared headstone read simply, "Thomas and Sarah Lawson. They proved love right." The farm remained in the family for generations. Samuel's son and his son after him worked the land, raised cattle, and told their children the story of their great-great-grandparents who had married as strangers and built an empire on love and hard work. And somewhere in the records of Butte, Montana, there remained a sermon delivered by Reverend Thornhill in 1877, declaring Sarah Henderson too plain to marry. That same record showed Thomas Lawson walking into the church immediately after and claiming her as his wife. It became a famous story in the area, passed down through generations. The story of the preacher who was wrong, the cowboy who was right, and the woman who proved that true beauty and worth cannot be judged by cruel eyes. It became a story about taking chances, about standing up for what is right, about love growing in unexpected places. But more than anything, it was a story about two people who found each other when they most needed finding, who chose each other twice, and who built a life that exceeded every expectation. It was a story about proving everyone wrong by proving each other right. And it all started with a simple declaration: "Then I will take her and prove him wrong."